everybody, Mobius1 here, bringing you another Star Wars Galaxies emulator video. Today, we're going to be talking about crafting with factories. I've done 2 crafting videos already. If you haven't watched them yet, and you don't know much about Galaxies' crafting system, or you're just starting and you're looking to become a crafter, I highly recommend you look or watch those 2 episodes before watching this one, because you're probably going to see a whole bunch of stuff in this video that makes no sense to you if you aren't already familiar with Galaxies' crafting system. So, that being said, let us go into my little chemical crafting lab, my meth lab, I guess. Alright, so those of you that are familiar with Galaxy's crafting system may know that once you get into the higher level crafting schematics, I'm just going to pull up my chemical one. Let's look at like what it takes to make a high-end buff pack, for example. And obviously, since I'm a master doctor in this video, I'm going to be using medicine to demonstrate this, but what I'm basically going to be showing you applies to all the crafting professions in the game. So don't worry about it. Like if you're like, well, Mobius, I'm not going to be a doctor. What about droid engineer? What about weaponsmith? What I show you here is going to apply to those as well. So just bear with me. So let's say we want to craft an Enhanced Health Medpack D, which, by the way, I think I mentioned this in my last video about crafting, but these higher level crafting schematics, some of them say require specialized crafting tool and crafting station. This is a specialized crafting tool. In this case, this is a food and chemical crafting tool. And this is a crafting station. Crafting stations come in 2 breeds. The ones that you can use inside public cities like Mos Eisley, Coronet, Theed, whatever. The ones that you find in NPC cities, those are called public crafting stations. They allow you to experiment on stuff, and they may unlock a couple mid-level schematics for you to craft, but in order to craft the really high-level stuff, you need to use a private crafting station, which the private isn't really the word that describes it, because if you can find a player-owned crafting station, like in a house, even if it's a public house, like if you go to a mall, or even if you come to my guild hall and you come into this back room here, you can use my crafting station to craft. That works. And again, I might have said that in my last video. It's been so long. So anyway, but you'll also notice that if you look for the requirements to make this health buff pack, for the drug duration compound and drug strength compound, it says requires 2 identical chemical release duration mechanism from a factory crate. And this one says requires 3 identical biological effect controller from a factory crate. What does that mean? Let's see. If I go in and make this, first, let's do this first. So this needs biological effect controllers. So if I go to make, I'm just going to make a regular one because I don't want to waste my resources. If I go to make a biological effect controller, I'm going to pop in here. Yeah, I got a ton of stuff to use. I don't know what's good or what's bad. I don't want to use good stuff. Sure, we'll use this hide and we'll use this water. Okay. So we go to make this. Great, it was great. We'll experiment on it just to have funsies. Just for funsies. Awesome. Cool. We're going to create the prototype item, not practice mode. Yes. And that's going to take 30 seconds to pop out. So let's make another one really quick also, just because we know it's going to need 3. And, oh boy, I don't remember I think I used these resources. So, assuming we use the exact same resources, it looks like our experimentation, oh no, we did a little bit better experimentation, but it doesn't matter. So now we have 2 out of the 3 biological effect controllers, right? Heck, let's make a 3rd because it requires 3. So we'll make a 3rd. We'll use the same resources because, whoops, that's not the same, that's the same. Because it says that they need to be identical, right? So as long as we use the same resources, they should be identical. That one's the same as the first, I think. No, 7.5, doesn't matter. It doesn't count anyway. And I'm going to show you why. So now, when I go to make the buff pack, when I click on the biological effect controller, you can see here it says 0 out of 3. And when I double click on it, it adds it. Now it's at 1 out of 3. And when I click on this one, it highlights it saying, oh yeah, hey, I can put that here. But when I double click on it, invalid ingredient. What do you mean invalid ingredient? It's a biological effect controller. Why can't I use it? Well, here's the trick, or here's the key, and here's why it doesn't work. It says they need to be identical biological effect controllers from a factory crate. So even if we look at these two, this one here and this one here, you can see both of them, they're technically, as far as the stats are concerned, they're identical, 7.5, 7.5. So I should be able to put that one and that one in, right? But it doesn't work. That's because the serial numbers are different. Every time you craft an item, the serial number is randomly generated, and it's different. The serial numbers need to match. That's just why the game works. Don't ask me why. I guess, I mean, it's part of the complexity of the crafting system in Galaxies. So I can't actually I can't craft 3 individual items. Even if the stats come out to be identical, it doesn't fulfill these requirements. The only way to fulfill these requirements is through factory crates. I'm not going to waste these, but what I'm going to do is we're going to show you, and actually I'm going to destroy all 3 of these because they're garbage anyway. I'm going to show you. So the first thing you need to do, and I have a couple schematics already. Oops. Yeah, we're just gonna do it with, we're gonna do another advanced biological, or do a regular biological. That way I don't get confused. So okay, so let's say you know you're going to need some sort of item in a factory crate. If we know we want to make this buff pack, we know we're going to need 3 identical biological effect controllers. Now, normally, as a doctor, you should be making advanced biological effect controllers. There's no reason you should not be doing this. But again, just for this video, since it doesn't really matter, I'm going to be making the standard ones. So, a couple things you want first. First, you want Pyolian cake, I don't know if I pronounced that right, and you want Bespin port. This food and this drink are very, very important for high-end, high-level crafters. Pyolian cake, this one specifically gives a 16 plus 16 bonus to item assembly. And this goes for any crafting profession. Bespin port, this one gives plus 19 to experimentation. Now, when you consume these, you can consume them both at the same time. You get 2 buffs, one for the assembly and one for the experimentation, and they last, in this case, about 23 minutes. Unfortunately, they only work for the next time you either assemble or experiment. So when I go to craft this biological effect controller, I'll use those same resources, punch them in. As soon as I do this, this buff disappears. So now you can see it's gone. And what that affects, a lot of people don't even see this here. This item assembly was a great success. So you can actually get varying results right out of the gate before you experiment. So this could have been an amazing success. And that Pyolian cake, I don't know if it helps you get an amazing success so much as it just prevents you from failing, because you can actually fail. It's pretty rare, but you can fail. Okay, so now when we go next, we definitely want to experiment because experimenting is going to make it better. Now, since we drank this Bespin port, our first experiment has a pretty good chance of being an amazing success, but it could also still be a great success. So we're hoping for an amazing success. It was a great success. Doesn't really matter. So I'm going to put as much as I can into power, or experimental effectiveness, because I want to get a higher power. Done experimenting. Now, here's where things get different for the factories. Under normal circumstances, you would create a prototype item, you get to name it, and the game would spit it out after a couple seconds into your inventory. We don't want to do that. Since we know we're going to be putting it into a factory, we want to create a manufacturing schematic. So now when you click that, you come to this screen. Again, you get to name it. So it doesn't really matter what you name it, but hey, I'm just so I don't get confused. YouTube's biological effect controller. And you also get to set the manufacturing limit. Now, here's a little secret. And if I'm wrong on this, someone please comment, but I don't think I'm wrong. there's no reason this should ever be less than 1,000. Because even if you don't plan on making 1,000 of the item, the factory will stop prematurely, and then you can just hold on to the manufacturing schematic in case you ever want to make more later. I don't think, like, the only reason, I honestly can't even think of a reason why you would set this at less than 1,000. Because even if you don't have enough resources, when the factory runs out of resources, it just turns itself off, and the schematic is still good. So I'm just going to leave this at 1,000. Create object, yes. And interestingly, that actually, it doesn't even take any time at all. You can see I can use both of these crafting tools still. Now, when I go into my data pad, under data, this is where it stores all your pets, droids, vehicles, and evidence disks that I can't get rid of from the Warren. It also stores your manufacturing schematics. So you can see I have a couple other ones in here from when I was making buffs and other advanced components. But here's the one that I just made, YouTube's biological effect controller. When you click on this, it gives you a couple things. Data size is how much capacity it's using in your data pad. So your data pad kind of has like an internal memory. So this uses 2 out of the 100. So you have a lot of room. Resources. It actually tells you exactly how many of specifically what resource type you need. So that's the other very important thing, is when you do this, you need to make sure you have enough resources to make however many of these you want, and it has to be the same exact resource. You can't use one type of leathery hide to make the schematic and then use a different type of leathery hide in the factory run. It does not work. They all need to be the same. Manufacturing limit, condition, I don't know why that condition would even go there, creator, serial number, and the stats of the item. So once you have that, you then need a factory. Factories they work pretty much just like harvesters as far as building, construction, powering them goes, and placement. There are a couple different types of factories. Since I'm a doctor, I'm using a food factory, food and chemical factory. You can also get like a structure factory, equipment factory, wearables factory. I feel like there's another one, but I forget what it is. Anyway, there's a factory pretty much specific to your profession. Once you have that, you're going to... Oh, great, it's a sandstorm out. I'm just going to come around here behind the guild hall. Look at that, you can't even see. Doesn't matter. Once you have the factory, you're going to place it just like you would a house or a harvester. There's my food and chemical factory. You're going to click and hold on it to access the radio menu. You want to always check the status, see how much maintenance is in there. So we have enough maintenance for a day, 15 hours. Power reserves, just like a harvester, you need to power it. If you don't, you should have... your power needs to be in your main inventory window in order to add it to a factory or a harvester. You can pay maintenance here, set name if you want, deposit power, all that's good, but that's not what we're going to do. We're going to go to options, and the first thing we're going to do is access schematic slot. This is going to give you a list of all of the schematics that you have in your data pad. So we're looking for YouTube's biological effect controller. Let me just turn the volume down. There we go. Okay. So YouTube's biological effect controller, we're going to click on that, and we're going to click use schematic. It's going to say schematic YouTube's biological effect controller has been inserted into the station. The station is now ready to manufacture items. Schematic limit is 1,000. So now when we click and hold on this and go to options, this list of options actually changes. You can see now we have start manufacturing objects, list ingredients needed for station, access schematic slot, ingredient hopper, output hopper. So let's do list ingredients needed for station first. So here we go. It gives us a nice little window. Says we need Spapuaka 6 units and Durozais 6 units, which we kind of already knew that because that's what we used to make it in the first place. So I'm going to just kind of put this out of the way for now, but I'm going to leave it open. Then we're going to open this again, go to options, access station ingredient hopper. We're going to put this off to the side as well. This is a Well, it is what it says it is. It's an ingredient hopper. This is where you put the resources that you plan on using to make the items. So that's why we left this open, because we need to find these specific items. I'm going to open my inventory, go into my organic backpack, because I know this is where we pulled them from. And now it's time to do some math. Since the schematic is good for 1,000 uses, I could, if I have enough resources, make 1,000 biological effect controllers. I don't want to do that, especially because I'm going to delete these at the end of the video. But let's say we want to make 10. Alright, and this is why the number on the schematic doesn't really matter. Even though the schematic is set for 1,000, if I only want to make 10 of an item, all I have to do is basic multiplication. If it takes 6 units to make one item, to make 10, you do 6 times 10 is 60 units. So let's see, I think this is the water, yep. So you can use resource type, make sure the names match, Durasize. I'm going to split this into a stack of 60. Scroll down, here's my 60 units, click and drag that into the ingredient hopper. We then need Spapoaka, which should be this. Yep, names match, right click, split, 60, not 69, 60. Drag and drop it in, and there we go. We have our 2 ingredients with the proper amounts for how many items we want in the ingredient hopper. We can close this, we can close this, we can close this, and guess what? We can close this. Now, I'm actually going to pull out my phone so we do a little timer. Because the biggest question that a lot of people ask me about the factories is, how do you know how long it's going to take? And I looked it up online because I actually didn't know the answer myself, and the answer that I found does not seem to be correct. So it might have been a different version of Galaxies, but the answer that I found is about like either 6 or 8 seconds per complexity of the item. Multiplied by the number of items. So a biological effect controller has a complexity of 10. Now, since we're making 10 of these, 10, well, times, I think it was 8 seconds, so 10 times 8 would be 80, times 10 would be 800 seconds. That's what, like 12 and a half, 13 minutes or something like that, which isn't that long, but it doesn't take that long in game. So I don't, like I said, I don't know if that's outdated information or what, but now that we have this all set up, we're going to go to options, and we're going to go to start manufacturing objects, and I'm going to start a timer at the same time, and go. Alright, it says station is activated, the station limit is 1,000, and now all you really have to do is wait. You can, leave. If you're doing a pretty big factory run, it's going to take some time, but it is important to know that if you ever need to stop it prematurely, you can, under options, stop manufacturing objects. There's no penalty or drawback to doing that, other than it splits the factory crates. And you'll see, so when this is done, it's going to give me a factory crate, 1 crate with 10 items in it, which is great, because then it doesn't use up a ton of inventory space. It keeps it nice and condensed. Like if you look at all the factory crates I have in my inventory, I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 crates that all, like this one has 100 items in it still. It would take up so much inventory if it wasn't for these crates. So by stopping it prematurely, you cut the production off at that point, and you'll get a crate with however many have been finished, and then you can resume production, but obviously, unfortunately, you can't combine 2 factory crates. Like even now, and I'll do this just because, if I could find one that's not as good as the rest. Okay, if I want to split this, and I split it into a stack of 1, I can't recombine these, unfortunately. So you don't want to, it doesn't really matter that much if you have a ton of inventory space, but there's no point in taking up more than you need to. Alright, so it's been about 2 minutes now. This really should not take long at all. I mean, 10 items is basically nothing. So we're just gonna hang out. The storm stopped. That's nice. The other thing is you do get an email when the factory is done. So we're basically just waiting on the mail now. And actually, let's say, so we got a structure builder mail, obviously from building the factory itself. And now we wait. Okay, so 5.5 minutes later. So it took exactly 5 minutes and 30 seconds. 5 minutes and 30 seconds to make 10 items. And you see we get a little email here. Food and Chemical Factory, your manufacturing station, Food and Chemical Factory, has run out of resource Spapacoa, whatever it is. So now when you go to options, it's back to this old list again. If we look at the ingredient hopper, obviously it's empty because it's used all the resources. But if we look at the output hopper, here's our crate of 10, and it's named exactly what we named the schematic when we made it. So I can double click on this. Now I have my crate of 10. Close all these windows, and now this is very important. You have to go to access schematic slot again, and you can see there's a third option here in the middle that says remove schematic, because we don't actually have the schematic in our data pad anymore. It's in the factory still. So by removing the schematic, we removed it from the factory, it's now back in our data pad, and you can see that the manufacturing limit is now 990. Because it was 1,000, we made 10, now it's 990. So if we ever get more of these resources, we can do another factory run with the same schematic. Since I don't plan on doing another run with this schematic, I can just destroy it from my data pad, and I get my 2 capacity freed up. Then we can go to destroy structure. Oh look, this is not fit for redeating. We need to deposit some more maintenance. Put 2,500 in. Destroy. There we go. We're all green. Type in the code 567305 and gone. Delete the waypoint because we don't need it anymore. And that's it. We now have our deed back. We now have our crate. Let's go make our buff, or at least show you that it does in fact work. So we'll go back into the buff lab. That's what I meant to say. And now, when we go to make our Enhance Health Med Pack D, you can see when we click on the crate, this highlights. And when we double click, there we go, 3 out of 3. That's it. Now, unfortunately, if you get this far and then decide to cancel when you remove that resource, it puts them back into your inventory as 3 individual items. So they're no longer in the crate. However, their serial numbers are still the same. See that? And because the serial numbers still match, you can still use them for crafting. It doesn't look like it takes them out of this window, but if you were to finish the crafting, they would all get consumed, and they would all be used in the crafting process. So, actually, let's prove that. Even though I use the crummiest resources I have. I don't know which of these is the worst. Oh, that's definitely the worst. 12, 23, 70, 67, 16, 23, sorry, so 12, 20, oh, no, I'm not using biological effect controllers. 67, oh, here we go, 56 is definitely on the low end. And, yeah, 67, okay. So we plugged all the stuff in that we need. I'm not even going to bother experimenting on it because it's going to get destroyed anyway. And there we go. All the biological effect controllers in the inventory have been used up. And they are gone. So that's it. That's crafting with factories. As you can see, I have a huge stockpile of different medicine subcomponents stored up for whenever I need them. I usually like to carry some with me, but if you do big runs, like, all right, so specifically for Doctor, and this is the last point that I'll make, that you really don't need that many resources. Like, you'll see people out gathering resources en masse. That's really only important if you're either planning to sell them or you're supplying like gear for an entire guild, because an advanced biological effect controller only requires 18 units of these two different resources. So if I want to do a factory run of 1,000 advanced biological effect controllers, I only need 18,000 units of each of these resources. That's not a lot at all when you think about it. I mean, compared to how much of some of these resources people are pulling, 1,000 each is a drop in the bucket. So it's not a big deal at all for people to get the resources and do a factory run of 1,000 of these. But also remember, if you're planning on doing something that requires subcomponents, you're going to need exponentially more subcomponents to do that factory run. So, like, since I need 3 advanced biological effect controllers to do 1 buff pack, if I want to do a factory run of 1,000 buff packs, I need 3,000 advanced biological effect controllers, which means I need 18 times 3, 36, 40, 52, or 54. I think it's 54. 54,000 resources then. Yeah, that's right. 54,000 for the subcomponents. It's a lot of math. Get a calculator, figure it out, but the process of crafting with the factories is as simple as this video. So I hope this video has helped you guys out. SWGEmu here, and I'll see you next time. I'm sorry, I totally forgot to do the math on how long it took to craft that. So let's see. If it took 5.5 minutes, let's do 60 times 5 plus 30. So it took 330 seconds total to do 10 items. So we'll divide that by 10, which means it took 33 seconds to do 1 item. And again, if we look at the complexity, we did standard biological effect controllers that have a complexity of 10, which means it should only take it takes like 3.5 seconds, a little less than 3.5 seconds per complexity. And again, that's if this formula is standard, not on some sort of curve with exponents and whatever. So assuming this is a standard curve, it should take 3.3 seconds per complexity of the item per item. So there you go. So that's, if you're trying to figure out how much time it's going to take, let's just apply that to the buff pack, since that's what we were looking at. So the buff pack has a complexity of 37. So if we do this correctly, we'll take 37 times 3.3. So it should take 122.1 seconds to make 1. So let's assume we're going to do a run of like 20. Because that's a typical run that I would do. So I come out with 2,442, and then we'll divide that by 60 for 60 seconds in a minute. And we get 40.7. So if this formula is correct, which I'm not 100% sure it is, if somebody thinks they know the actual formula, go ahead and comment. But it should take just under 41 minutes to do a run of 20 buff packs. Alright, so that's it for this episode then. Again, any corrections or anything you guys have questions on, feel free to leave a comment, post a comment. And if you for some reason watch this video without watching my other crafting videos, go watch them too. You can click on the little Star Wars Galaxies icon that's going to pop up at the end of the video here. It'll link you right to my playlist. It's very fancy. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. SWGEmu here, and I'll see ya.